Catapulting Commissions family, what's up, team? Welcome back to this week's episode of the Catapulting Commissions podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Garcia. Mental health, sales success, do they go hand in hand? We have a guest today. We're going to dive just into that. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Jeff Riseley. Jeff is the founder of the Sales Health Alliance, which was created to empower salespeople and leaders to reach peak levels of sales performance and well-being through better mental health. Jeff Company aligns salespeople, sales leaders, health experts, and technology providers on building awareness around mental health within sales. Jeff, welcome to the Catapulting Commissions podcast.
Excited to be here, Anthony. Always nice to kind of meet a fellow salesperson and leader that's open to talking about this stuff and build awareness around mental health and sales.
Yeah, man. Jeff, I got to be honest with you, man. This couldn't hit home at a better time than ever, not only for the audience, but for me personally, right? Mental health in sales, just talking about mental health in general, right? Some people don't, it's not as embraced, right? Some people really kind of you hear like, oh, just get over it. Like, oh, you'll be fine. Like push it through. But there's really some serious impacts. So before we dive into that, give me a background on your sales experience, because you have an impressive resume. So how'd you start into sales? And following up with that, when did you realize mental health was an area for you to focus and build your business on?
Yeah, so it was a bit of a journey to get here. So I've been in sales for about 11 years now. Started in sort of the classic boiler room type of sales environment where I was being measured on whether or not I could make $200 a day, achieve 2.5 hours of talk time. You weren't hitting your metrics, you were let go very quickly. So very much that kind of sink or swim type of sales environment. And on the surface, I did really well from an individual contributor level, went on to win all sorts of incentives and all that kind of big commission checks, all that good stuff that we like to relate to. But behind the scenes, I was not okay. I had really bad anxiety, insomnia, and I'd get these really nasty panic attacks in the middle of the night. And it was after the third panic attack put me in the hospital when I started to realize that this is not good. This is not healthy. And I should probably start to figure out, what's going on here. So first thing I did was I went to see my doctor. He prescribed me some anxiety medication, which I tried for 2 to 3 months, really hated how it made me feel. I felt like I lost touch with my intuition and my emotions, the things I was relying on to be a top performer. And going to therapy 10 years ago was still highly stigmatized. So I was at this kind of moment in my life where I'd found this career that I really enjoy, the rush you get when you close a big deal, the learning, the growth opportunities. But if I wanted to stay in this career, I need to figure out a way to make myself more mentally resilient. So I just started learning everything that I possibly could. What is mental health? How does the brain react under stress? What are the different things that I could be doing on a daily basis to make sure that I'm showing up my best self each day? And didn't really understand how important this was until fast forward to July of 2018. I just launched my first sales consulting website. 3 days after I launched the website, I was like, entrepreneur life, here we go. And I was blindsided and diagnosed with testicular cancer. So life threw this crazy curveball at me that I wasn't ready for. But it was through that experience where I realized the same strategies I was using to take care of my mental health and sales, I naturally started to execute on during this next stressful period of my life. And the more I started to reflect on this topic in my career, I realized, look, anxiety in sales is not optional. It's really part of everyday life. And when salespeople and teams become depressed, anxious, or burnt out, the performance really starts to suffer. So all my work and kind of my passion for this is how do we shift the conversation on this topic and really position it as, look, salespeople are corporate athletes that need the pads and the helmets they need to play that contact sport every single day, and use different strategies to optimize that mental performance and the mental side of sales that is totally neglected and overlooked by sales leaders and teams.
Man, peeling so much back, highlight that, right? Catapulting Commissions family, sales professionals are corporate athletes. And I love that analogy. I love what you shared about your journey, and kudos to you, because I think it takes a lot of courage to say, hey man, I'm going to acknowledge and figure ways to improve mental health. And they're I've been around when it's stigmatized to have a therapist, and Catapulting Commissions family, you've heard me share this on the show. And if you've read the Catapulting Commissions book, you've heard me talk about it. I mean, I've seen a therapist nearly 4.5, 5 years now. So I think it's incredibly brave to say, okay, I'm going to shift this and make this my life's work. Now, when you say that the mental resilience of salespeople, right, I want to add, I think that the salespeople and the sales leader fall into this category, right? Because stress in sales isn't isolated to just the sales rep, right? It works its way all the way up the food chain. How it's delivered, how it handles that's different. So, what was there a specific example or a specific story where the stress you were experiencing got the best of you? Like you were, I don't want to give you don't give you an answer, but it was the low of low where you're like, I'll never feel this again.
Yeah, a good question. And I think a lot of it comes down to sort of those, the um, underlying sensations or emotions and feelings that were driving those panic attacks early on in my career. I think one of the things that a lot of salespeople don't realize is that, at least for me, I showed up in sales and we face these really difficult emotions every single day, whether it's anger 1 second to maybe jealousy 1 second when we look at the leaderboard to pure joy and excitement when we book a demo or we close that deal. There's all of these really, really challenging emotions. And I know for myself, what happened was I'd get to the end of the day, I wouldn't even know what I was feeling. I would just start feeling this really big buzzing sensation of this uncomfortable feeling. And I'd want to avoid it. So I'd be partying, I'd be drinking, I'd be playing hours upon hours on video games, trying to run and escape these emotions. And it really comes down to the fact that a lot of salespeople have a low level of emotional literacy. So emotional literacy is you're able to identify and label the emotions that you're feeling and put it into words to not only describe and make sense to yourself, but also describe and communicate to the people around you. And when you have that low level of emotional literacy, all you can really start to label are really big, powerful emotions like anger, like anxiety, like fear. And you're left in this situation of that emotional roller coaster where you're ping ponging between these really high highs and these really low lows. And as a result, it's very, very uncomfortable. And to kind of like the way I talk about the mental health strategy that most sales teams and organizations implement is having a fun drinking culture to navigate that, which is not healthy. And there's really strategic things that you can be doing, like working on your emotional literacy, that can help you understand, learn, and grow from these challenging and uncomfortable experiences that are common and present within sales.
You know, you're taking some of the challenges and saying, I'm gonna acknowledge and I'm gonna learn from this. And I think that's incredibly profound. You know, sales people, we get hit with so much adversity throughout the day, right? Just thinking the typical day-to-day sales life, right? Making phone calls, prospecting, getting in front of people, adversity. You think the typical day of a sales manager, sales leader, you're, you know, I always use a third, right? A third of your team is doing well, a third of your team hates their life, and a third of your team is looking for a job on Google. Like you're dealing with adversity in that space as well. So to say just embrace it and find, okay, I'm I just how you elaborate it is just telling on me, or is enlightening for me because it makes me feel, Jeff, all honesty, that I am not alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have felt isolated with this issue, and is what are your thoughts here? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and specifically when it comes to mental health. There is some thoughts out there about the leaderboard, the stack rankings, right? We see people who stack rank salespeople for everything, right? If you go to the archaic days of a whiteboard and everyone's in the boiler room, I mean, whose name was on the top, who had a stupid little star, how many calls you made. Now it's digital, right? So I feel like there's sales managers that are sending emails on a daily basis. Here's how you rank amongst your peers. Here's how you rank amongst your peers. What are your thoughts on that for the mental health of the sales professional?
So every piece of research in the last 30 to 40 years will tell you that having a leaderboard and in a team environment like this is probably one of the dumbest things that you could possibly do from an optimal performance standpoint. It makes zero sense to inject and take away things like psychological safety. So at a basic level, someone on the bottom of that dashboard, when they feel pushed to, let's say, the exterior of their tribe, so that their sales team, they feel like they're on the bottom, they're on the exterior, their stress response will kick in, high levels of cortisol, adrenaline, things will start to flow through their system, which makes them unable to be creative, unable to problem solve. They'll only be thinking about themselves instead of the clients and the buyers that they're working with. That's one aspect of it. If you think about on a very micro level, I don't know how many listeners know this, but every single second, our body is essentially capable of picking up about 2 million bits of information. So if we're talking right now, Anthony, you're probably not feeling your feet on the ground right now, in your socks, on the shoes, feeling the floor. But now that I talked about it, your attention is directed down there and yeah, those sensations are there. So a lot of what we perceive is getting cut out. We can only really consciously perceive about 126 bits of information every single second. So if you think about that, if some of that tiny sliver of information, that tiny little bit of information of what we're perceiving in the world around us is being directed towards what if I lose my job? Or what if I can't beat Sally or Johnny who's ahead of me? What if my boss doesn't like me? All of these different things, these micro interactions are taking you away from directing that 126 bits of information into that sales call, into that email, delivering it as best as you possibly can. So having that take place is just one of the dumbest things on the planet that makes no sense from a optimal performance standpoint. I can talk about this forever. There's both those researches talks about how the more you extrinsically motivate someone, the less intrinsically motivated they become. That's why you're likely seeing a lot of this great resignation and salespeople taking a lot of sales sabbaticals, because they're only motivated by extrinsic motivators. And now they're in a position where they're looking for more meaning and more purpose in their role, which isn't being found by these extrinsic motivators like leaderboards and commission checks and all that stuff that's common within sales. So we could talk about this all day, but leaderboards in general are just so counterproductive to every single thing that a human needs to perform.
No, I love that. I love that. And I'm going to say it on air, Tara. We definitely need to highlight that, because I think the truth about the leaderboards is I forgive my French, but I think they're bullshit at times, because I have seen what you just shared right there firsthand. You use the phrase psychological safety. As a sales manager, I have delivered leaderboards out to people only to find the person that was on the bottom of the leaderboard feels frustrated, feels stressed, and then says, Anthony, this literally puts me in a downward spiral. So now I have somebody who wasn't performing. They think they're going to lose their job. And now they're out underperforming, not feeling well. And then they come to me later and they want to leave the organization. And the old school mentality was like, oh, well, we'll just get somebody else. We'll get somebody else. We'll get somebody else. The Great Resignation says otherwise. It is the hardest time to find talented salespeople in the world right now, right? The war for talent is at an all-time high. And the managers who adapt, I believe, are going to be the most impactful moving forward. The managers and the companies that continue to beat this down are going to see problems, cultural issues, just repetitive cycles of revolving doors of sales reps. Because let's be honest here, any person that's working in an organization, they know they're on the bottom, right? So like, what's the purpose of having that person, of beating that person up? So let me give you a counter argument to that, Jeff. So let's just play devil's advocate. Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna add one more thing just to kind of sort of build on what you said, because I think it's important. And I think sort of one of the more insidious things about leaderboard specifically within sales is it's wrapped around this kind of idea that it's a sales quote unquote team, and that these people on the leaderboard are going to be cooperating and working together. And I'm a huge sports guy. I love basketball. And the way I kind of phrase this to sort of the leaders and the clients that I work with is, if you take the LA Lakers, for example, and you say LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Russell Westbrook, you each have to go out and score 25 points tonight, or else we're going to trade you to a different team. What do you think will happen if you get to the fourth quarter of that game, or the 3 minutes left, and one of those players isn't at that 25 points per game? Are they going to make the right pass? Are they going to collaborate? Are they going to make that right decision to support the team and help that team win? Absolutely not, because that's what leaderboards do. It focuses on things it takes the focus off of what's best for the company and what's best for the team, to focus on what's best for me so that I can survive and be safe in my role. And so you have these sales leaders that are wondering, oh, why is my team not motivated? Why are they not collaborating? Where's all this toxicity coming from? And it's coming from structural things like the leaderboard that are counterproductive to what we need to thrive and cooperate.
Man, Jeff, you have no idea how much you're speaking my language right now, right? We've met through we met through the process of appearing on media together, and so we haven't really dive into the personal background. But I do, like, 100%, man. This is like divine intervention. I love what you're saying, but let's just humor me. Let's just go the devil's advocate, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I am a sales manager, and I have people at the bottom of the leaderboard that I need to perform. They're not performing. How do I get that person to perform while respecting their mental health?
Good question. So I think it's way easier. And I think what we've gotten in the habit of doing as sales managers and leaders is not stopping to ask why and find out why they're actually not underperforming. So if someone's underperforming, it's way easier to, well, let's draft up a spiff or let's draft up an incentive and use an extrinsic motivator to say, hey, let's get you motivated this way. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it doesn't resolve the underlying issue of, oh, this person might be struggling with burnout, or there's something else going on in their day-to-day life that's sort of impact. Maybe they're having a fight with their significant other, or someone close to them just passed away and they're not opening up. So leaders that aren't taking the time to pause and check in and actually say, hey, how are you feeling? Diving into what actually motivates that person. A good question you can use is, you weren't unmotivated all the time when you started at this company. There was a moment of time when you got this job and you were super excited to start working here and you were super motivated. What happened? What was that thing that was picking you up every day saying, I can't believe I just got a job at X company. I'm so excited to go start working for them. What was that motivator? Like, what was that driving force that has now been lost behind burnout, declining mental health, which is shifting that perspective? So that's one thing. The other thing is, if a sales leader hasn't put in the time to build that trust, where that person is, when you go to check in on that person and you built that trust to uncover that sort of more sensitive, more emotional kind of answer, they're not going to tell you what it is. Because what happens within sales is there's what's called a vulnerability paradox. And if I were to ask you or anyone on this call, how likely are you to be vulnerable with someone who's judging your performance every single day? And 99% of the time will be, I'm not going to be vulnerable with that person at all. Like, I don't want them to know what I'm going through. So unless that leader has invested the time, put in those micro actions where they're building trust by opening up themselves, sharing their own stories, it's going to be very, very hard for them to uncover why that person is unmotivated. And that frustration is going to lead to beliefs that this person's not cut out for sales. There's something wrong with the rep. We got to get rid of them, as opposed to, no, like, we're just not connecting with that underlying motivation and refueling on that deeper purpose that helps them get motivated on a daily basis.
I like what you said there, and in that whole discovery process of finding out what is their true internal motivator and having that process, that is built on a relationship of trust, like 100%. And trust is earned, right? Trust is earned over time, right? Trust is earned depending on who you are. Right? Sometimes you trust somebody too easily, but you could lose trust in a fraction of a second. Like, it doesn't take a lot to lose trust, and to regain trust is incredibly challenging. So that relationship between your sales team and the sales manager, when you have it built on trust, yeah, I could see how having those conversations. I used to make an analogy or a suggestion to say, hey, if you're the sales leader and your bottom 10 performers struggled, if you just penciled 30 minutes and you're the sales leader or the sales VP or the high person in charge, and you made a 3-minute phone call to each person, say, hey man, I'm just reaching out, I got a few minutes. How are you feeling? Talk to me. What's going on? That simple 3-minute phone call could take one of those people who are underperforming that month, that quarter, that year, and be like, hey man, I'm valued here. Somebody cares. I'm part of a team. I'm going to contribute. I'm going to get remotivated. I'm going to get re-engaged. But many times it's the whole 80-20 rule. 80% of my revenue comes from 20% of my performers. I'm a sales manager. I'm going to focus on the top 20%. They're going to get all my attention, and the rest of you, well, screw you. I can replace you. And we're seeing that, the impacts of that over years of conditioning. It's like the old bullshit sales phrase of always be closing. Like, get out of here, dude. I mean, the high pressure hardcore sales isn't relevant with today's consumer, and the style of management that was relevant then isn't relevant with today's sales rep. So I like how you mentioned that, and finding what truly motivated people to get to that motivation. Do you do or recommend some checkups along the way? Because there's, I feel like we respond, not even respond because that's the wrong word. I feel like we react to sales boards to get information, and we haven't put in that sweat equity. So how do you recommend we build that trust building so I can culture a relationship of trust that does focus on the mental health, mental well-being, while understanding the responsibilities of my role is to generate revenue?
Yeah, so I think a couple things. First, I think it's really, really important. 100% par for must happen no matter what is sales leaders have to be open and more vulnerable with how they're feeling. So I've yet to meet a salesperson or a sales leader that hasn't struggled with their mental health at some point during their sales career, whether that's one sleepless night or one time when they felt stressed. Talk about that experience more frequently. On days when you haven't slept or something happened at home, start your meetings by saying, hey, just so you all know, I didn't get a great sleep last night. If I don't respond to your email or your Slack as quickly as possible, or maybe I'm short with you, just know it's not you. This has been going on in my own personal life. I just want you to know that, like, having conversations like that to help people educating the team that they're open to talking about how they're feeling, as opposed to positioning themselves as this hardened perfectionist. Because there's not a single person on this planet that wants to have a vulnerable conversation with someone who's judgmental and is a perfectionist. Like, we're human. Everyone has their own kind of makes mistakes and has their own kind of weak spots. Let's talk about those. I think the other thing as well is one of the big mistakes that we make in sales is a lot of sales teams and leaders misdefine mental health as mental illness. Mental health defined is a spectrum of well-being that we all fluctuate along based on what's happening in our internal environments, like our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, as well as our external environment, like the deals falling through, the people we interact with, the buyers or colleagues, what have you. So what that means is it's very similar to physical health. There's going to be people thriving. There's going to be people that are in the middle kind of coping and struggling. And then there's going to be people who are unwell. And right now, a lot of people perceive mental health as mental illness, or those people that are really unwell, as opposed to that spectrum of well-being that we're all fluctuating along. So it's in your best interest as a sales leader to have more conversations, to your point, to say, hey, how are you doing, to get constant pulses of where they are. Maybe if they were thriving and then now they're maybe coping or struggling, catching that and having conversations and resolving those issues, getting to the root cause of what's causing that kind of decline, as opposed to waiting until they're mentally ill, very burnt out, and have no hope of performing on a daily basis. So you're absolutely right. It's very, very important to have processes built in, to have these check-ins, to talk to your reps, to see how they're doing on a regular basis, because it all connects back to mental health and that spectrum of well-being, similar to physical health. You're not going to play basketball well if you have a twisted ankle or a pulled muscle, or at the very worst case, a broken ankle.
Man, it reminds me of something that fun fact. I did not realize I was dealing with or addressing people's mental health when I did this. But what I did, when every time I would do a field ride with somebody who worked for me, I'd get in their car, right? And these are typically 2 or 3 days to get in your car. We're going to go travel, visit your prospects. I had employees for years. I did this. Everybody would they would be shocked, no matter how many times I did it. Hey, how are you feeling? Talk to me about your job satisfaction. That was my opener in the car. Not who are we visiting, not how are we prospecting, what deals are we closing, how are you feeling? And that always let people have this just true vulnerable conversation. It's you and me one-on-one in the car for the next 8 hours. And that was how the conversation went. In doing that, I have found that I don't want to say I was the greatest manager ever, but I do say that I definitely found times for people where I'm like, man, this person, right now, they don't need to be out prospecting. Their head is so overwhelmed by things. It's like, hey man, you know what? Let's go sit down and have some coffee, or let's take a pause, man. Let's go for a walk. Let's just talk about life. How's your family? And in doing that, it was a trust building exercise. So I love what you said there, and just having that. And it wasn't, and by no means am I agree, it wasn't intentional, but I just always felt that the reason I did it was if I knew how someone's job satisfaction was, I knew everything else. Like if they were happy with the job, then I knew things were going well. If they told me a lie, they were happy with the job, or if they were unhappy with the job, I knew that they weren't receiving something from me. Whether it was the company, I represented the company, I represented the organization, so I was the face. You're not receiving something from me, and I need to figure out what that is and how to address that. But
to your point, like I think that's part of like what sales leaders really need to embrace is whether you're a seller or whether you're a sales leader, like your first job is not to hit those targets yourself. Like that is not number one priority. Number one priority is to serve the people that you are leading. How are you serving them? And in those micro conversations that you were having, you were in a position where you were trying to serve and help them and make their space in that car ride more enjoyable. So it's not surprising that was a highly effective strategy, because people are not stupid. They have intuitions that pick up on, is this a safe space or not a safe space? And when they're talking with someone who's really leaning in to try to get to know them and be empathetic and compassionate to their situations, that makes a huge difference to their performance down the road.
Man, I love it. And I wish more executives and organizations understood this message, because truth be told, in my career and as a corporate sales leader, I mean, I borderline got ran out because I refused to do certain archaic styles of leadership where I was just like, this isn't me. Like I'm not gonna pat the back of the corporate leadership team because I want to do things in an archaic manner. I truly believe in people first, people over profits. I ran my entire near 20-year career in corporate America in that fashion. And yeah, I mean, sometimes it worked out. Sometimes, I was the odd man out, and I never backed down. I'm like, I'm sorry, this is how I lead. And I'm gonna build a lifelong trusting relationship with somebody because I wanted to get the better good for my people, whether it was with my company or not. And that's a whole nother conversation. But what I want to ask Jeff is, there's two parts to mental health in sales specifically, right? One, the environment you put yourself in, which is what we talked about a little bit, right? The sales leader, the sales management, even the organization. I would even argue that if you're in a position where your mental health isn't being cared for properly and you're a sales rep, right, then leave. Like, it's not hard to find another place where someone will take care of you. Like, it's the biggest fear we have. I promise you'll be okay and leave. But the second part to mental health, and here's what I want your take on. What can I do to help improve my own mental health, right? Because sales is stressful. Like, no matter how we cookie cutter it, it is stress. So there's a stressful component to it, whether it's stress from the company, or if I'm a salespreneur, meaning all my income comes from commission. I mean, Jeff, I have a wife and 3 kids, right? Hey man, this and 2 dogs. All right, these 4 kids and 2 dogs rely on me for food, water, shelter, everything. So if I don't sell something, I already feel stressed. What can I do to protect myself?
Big question. I was going to say loaded question, but I think it's better to say just like big question, because that is essentially what I've sort of talked about, what I share with people all the time. I think again, we could talk about this forever and kind of go through every kind of toolkit that I share in kind of my programs and what I write about. But I think there would be, I guess, a couple key things. Number one is becoming more aware of what declining mental health feels like in your own self. So thinking about it from that kind of mental health spectrum standpoint, you need to be aware of how you're showing up each day. And on those days when you might not be feeling great, where you're in the middle or closer to the bottom, or even when you're at the top, your mood follows your behavior. So you need to be thinking about actions that you can be taking on a daily basis that will shift you closer to that position where you're thriving, as opposed to waiting until you're in that place where you're really struggling and you're really burnt out. To do that, there's essentially 4 buckets that you want to be aware of, which are changes to your thinking. So those will usually start with intrusive thoughts that start with the statement, what if? What if I'm not good at sales? What if I mess up this call? What if X, Y, and Z goes poorly? That's kind of what you want to keep it aware of. It changes to your thinking. Then there's emotion. The emotional bucket changes to what you're feeling emotionally. Third bucket is changes to what you're feeling physically. So for me, I get these really nasty sweats in the middle of the night. I get this pain in the upper right side of my stomach. Your changes physically are going to be different. So what does that look like? And the fourth bucket is, what are changes to the types of behaviors and habits you're doing? Do you stay in bed longer? Do you go for an extra smoke? Do you have a couple extra drinks after work? Do you play hours of video games? Do you party? What are some of those bad habits? Overeat? And what are some of those bad habits that you use? And you can essentially get a pulse of where you fall in that mental health spectrum by looking at what's the intensity, the frequency, and the duration of all of these different things. So for example, if you go out and get super drunk one night, that's a very high intensity event. But if it only happens once every 6 months, the frequency and the duration are all really low. So you're probably should look into why that's happening. But at the same time, we all like to have fun sometimes. If you're showing up and you're angry all of the time, or you're drinking heavily all of the time, the intensity, the frequency, and the duration are all really, really high, which is a sign that you've moved down that mental health spectrum at a point where you need to start having conversations, exploring what's going on here. Why are you feeling the way you're feeling? Maybe talking to a therapist, reaching out to a doctor. So the awareness piece is absolutely huge. Second thing I would say is salespeople are just notoriously bad at enforcing really strong boundaries with work. And all of the research and the data that I've uncovered and done is, when you have strong boundaries with work, it actually leads to better performance, way better performance, like almost 3 times better performance over time, which is crazy to think about. And that's because you're allowing your body to offload stress on a daily basis, as opposed to what 95% of salespeople do today, which is they try to offload stress all at once. They work themselves down to the bone for 3 months or 6 months, and then they try and offload it all at once in a 2-week vacation or a Christmas vacation or what have you. And what they don't realize is, during that time when you were grinding to that vacation 3 months, 6 months out, you're moving down that mental health spectrum and your performance is getting worse and worse and worse, as opposed to enforcing strong boundaries and offloading that stress on a daily basis by doing basic things like eating right, doing a meditation, going to sleep at a good time, basic things that will help you recover from the stress that you're putting your body through every single day.
Catapulting Commissions family, if you are not taking care of yourself, right? If you're not taking that opportunity to break down some of the things that Jeff did, I mean, help yourself. You have one life to live. You have one you. And I think a best version of you is the internal best version of you to get the external better of you. And Jeff, man, I appreciate that coming on the show and sharing that. I saw, tell us a little bit, real quick, high level overview, Sales Health Alliance, right? So, what can someone do to learn more about the Sales Health Alliance? What can someone do to learn more about working with you? Can you just give us a little, your highlights on that story?
Yeah, so Sales Health Alliance, I built it to be a resource first and a business second. So if you just go to saleshealthalliance.com, you'll find, I think, almost 150 pieces of content, articles, videos, podcasts like this, things that I've done to help build awareness, but also provide really tactical things that you can start doing as this open resource and super accessible resource. So check it out. If you wanted to kind of work with myself, what I typically do is I work with organizations building out sort of multi-week programs where we start looking at mental health from the lens of some of the stuff that we talked about today, and different things around how do you use stress to your advantage within sales? How do you manage your stress? How do you kind of become more resilient on a daily basis? Different things that you can change within your mindset. And these are programs that I lead live virtually with teams. So if you're interested, you can send me an email at jeff@saleshealthalliance.com, or just use the contact us form or connect with me on LinkedIn. It all works, and we can kind of explore further together.
Catapulting Commissions family, do me a favor. Go get connected with Jeff. You'll have his LinkedIn profile in the show notes below. He has, I'm looking here, you have a guide to better mental health and sales. You have a couple free resources on here. I've downloaded a few of them myself. Catapulting Commissions family, get connected, because at the end of the day, I do this show because I want to bring valuable guests like Jeff on. 140 episodes. I've never had a guest come on the show yet to talk specifically about mental health in sales. And this is, if I can make this a 2-part, 4-part episode, I will. Jeff, I'd love to bring you back down the road. Are you open to coming back on the show and diving deeper in some mental health for sales?
Yeah, definitely open to it for sure. Because when I started this, it was, who's this crazy person talking about mental health and sales? But I think we're now at a point where a lot of leaders and organizations are really leaning into the conversation, which is really exciting to see.
I think you're only going to grow, my friend. 100%. I think we need to hear more about it. Jeff Riseley, salespeople, we have to figure this thing out, get a grip on it, take advantage of it. Do me a favor, improve your mental health. Is there any other resources they can find you, Jeff? I'm sorry, I'm butchering myself here. Found you on LinkedIn. Website, saleshealthalliance.com. Is that what it is?
Yeah, saleshealthalliance.com. And the book, the guide that you talked about, really easy guide to help having start learning about how to have more frequent conversations on mental health. It's only $15, so super accessible. So check that out too. It's a good one.
Okay. Catapulting Commissions family is the best $15 you'll have ever spent. I'm telling you, I read a snippet. I'm going to buy the full thing here as soon as I get off the air. Do me a favor, follow, like, subscribe, and connect, and we will see you next week.